brushing it off. This morning I found some information that hit me like a ton of bricks, but first some backstory. I am 41, my wife is 39, and we have been together for almost 16 years, married for more than 12. We have 2 kids, ages 7 and 5. We live a very comfortable lifestyle, and we are both attractive and in shape people. To make this short, like most couples, we've had ups and downs in our marriage, but one thing I felt for sure was that we would always be faithful and loyal to each other. At the beginning of this year, I realized that I needed to be more open and connected with my wife, and I began to go to individual counseling to work on myself and address some trauma from my childhood. This has been really good for me but has put some strain on our relationship due in part to the fact that my wife is not used to me trying to open up to her. She has been complaining that she feels suffocated and needs space. About a month ago, mid-August, things came to a head and we had some really hard conversations. The gist of these conversations was that my wife doesn't feel any passion for me and never really has. She came from a traumatic past as well, including CSA, and she basically married me because I provided her with security and checked all the right boxes. She thought that the passion would come with time, but she says it never did. I was devastated. We decided that she needed to start individual counseling for her issues and we needed to do marriage counseling to see if we could make this work. Once we started marriage counseling, things seemed to be trending in the right direction. But on Monday of this week we had a really tough conversation about how my wife is scared that she'll never develop those kinds of feelings for me. She did everything but say the not in love line. During this conversation, it seemed like she was holding something back, and I grilled her hard about whether there was anything or anyone else. In addition, I have noticed some recent obvious red flags. Last week, she changed her phone passcode. She said that she did it because the kids kept downloading stuff onto her phone, which is a plausible explanation, but she seemed defensive and over-explanatory when she raised the issue. And she didn't tell me what her new passcode was. We've always known each other's passcodes. That raised a red flag. I actually figured out what her new passcode was, but never looked in her phone, but then she changed it again a few days ago. She also seemed much more protective with her phone. So, when we had our conversation on Monday night, alarm bells were going off big time, but my wife assured me that she would never cheat on me and there was no one else. If she had feelings for someone else, she would simply leave me. I should also mention that our physical life has been okay for the last few years. We have sex anywhere from 1 to 4 times a week. She almost always orgasms, several times, but recently our bonding has become increasingly robotic, almost like I'm a human vibrator for her. And then 2 weeks ago, she told me that with everything we were going through, she wasn't comfortable being intimate with me. Yes, another red flag. This morning, something got in my head to check phone logs. I honestly didn't expect to find anything. I mean, we're in lockdown, I work from home and she's a stay-at-home mom, so when could she be talking to someone else? Well, you guessed it, I found dozens of phone calls, 9 hours worth, going back to July with her ex-boyfriend that she dated for a few years right before meeting me. Get this, she broke up with him because he cheated on her. This guy lives out of state, so there's no way they could have physically cheated, but clearly an emotional affair is happening. What's most disturbing is that fact that although it appears that he initiated these conversations, she quickly became engaged and since then she has initiated most of the calls. The calls have been very streaky. They talked for a week straight at the end of July, then 2 weeks of no calls, then 2 weeks straight, almost every day, in mid-August, then 2 weeks of no calls and then a lot of calls this past week. I am sensitive to red flags, and this has been the only time I've ever had any warning bells going off. We've always had full access to each other's accounts and lives. Our marriage did have passion before kids, and if she wasn't in love with me then, she is an unbelievable con artist. The passion has really decreased over the years since kids, but she is definitely rewriting history to some extent. I love my wife with everything I have, but I cannot stomach a marriage with someone who doesn't love me. I don't know if this marriage can be saved or if I even want to at this point, but I will not tolerate this. A point of clarification, I have not seen the content of any texts. Based on the logs, there have been only a few texts, and they have only come from him. That tells me that it's very likely they have taken written comms to an app. Based on what my wife has told me, this guy is an experienced cheater, so he would know what to do. I would like input on how to confront. I have 2 thoughts. 1. Sit her down tonight after the kids are in bed and give her one shot to tell the truth if she wants any chance of saving this marriage. 2. Tell her I know about her and her ex, without telling her exactly what I know. Hand her printed out divorce papers. Tell her to decide, and leave. 3. Something else. Of course, today, I have a full slate of calls for work, and I feel like I'm not even in my own body. How could she sit in marriage counseling with me talking about how much she wanted to save our marriage all while talking to this D-bag? Based on the vows I made, which I take seriously no matter how she feels about me, I owe it to our marriage and our family to try to work it out. When I look my son or daughter in the eye when they're older, I can honestly tell them that I tried my best. She can throw away her morals and values, but I have mine. It's not a question of self-respect or pride. You don't know me from Adam, but these are not problems for me. My comment, get strong, now. Man, the hell up. I say that as a fellow guy because sometimes we need to hear it. Now is not the time to break down. You are in an active war zone. This is the fight of your life. You post on here, you know the deal. Fight, collect evidence, get in touch with a lawyer, get the paperwork, file for divorce. You can try all you want, but she has shown you that she is not into you. She told you as much. Even if it's because she is having this emotional affair. You know enough. Life is too short. She told you she is not into you. You deserve someone who is. Tell her as much and ask for an amicable divorce. Tell her to get a job. She has too much time on her hands and not enough responsibility. OP responds, it's interesting being on this side of the fence after having read other stories. I've always felt similarly to you. Objectively, I know it's not, but it feels like a completely different situation happening to me. There's something about being lied to my face by the one person I've trusted with my life and well-being for almost 2 decades that has rocked me. I appreciate your input and the tough love. Here's what I know for sure. 1. Being a paycheck for someone who doesn't love me is not an option. 2. I am a successful attorney in the prime of my life. I'm 6'2" and in incredible shape, and objectively I'm a good-looking dude, and with the work that I've been doing on myself, I know I'd be just fine on my own. 3. I am regrouping and will be prepared for tonight. Printed out divorce papers are being presented to her, and I will get answers from her without letting her know what I know. 4. I'm surrounded by good people. Update. I confronted my wife this afternoon. It lasted about 3 minutes. I told her I knew she's been lying to me and gave her the opportunity to tell me the truth. I told her I knew what she's been doing with her ex, and the only way she could possibly save our marriage was by being honest about it. She chose door no. 2. So I handed her the printed out divorce papers and left. She called me a bunch, but I didn't answer. I came home about 6 hours later and we talked for a while, but it was just an exercise in blame shifting, half apologies, and a failure to see the magnitude of what she did. They are just friends, even though she's vehemently insisted throughout our marriage that 1. Married people cannot be friends with exes they slept with, and 2. This particular ex was an asshole. But hey, I'm happy for her newfound friendship. The brazenness of her response to all of this has been eye-opening. So yeah, she's deep in the fog, but it gets even better. Checking the call logs again tonight, I see that she actually called this dude earlier this evening after I initially confronted her. When I asked her why she called him, her response, just to say hey. The callousness was astounding, but I guess I'm finding out who she really is. Starting tomorrow, I'm taking steps to protect myself. First thing up, I'm getting lawyer recommendations now and will be setting up calls ASAP. My comment, sorry, but in the not-so-distant future, you will see this as a gift. Once you get outside of this hell, you will find a truly incredible world. And the only negative feeling you will have been because you will wonder why you didn't kick her to the curb a long time ago. Sounds like your wife likes the ones she can't have, like this dude. You were probably good marriage material, but now she has fallen back into her old ways. Tell her to get a new husband. Story 2. I'm a man in my 40s considering a divorce from my wife, also in her 42nd. We have been married 25 years and have an adult daughter in her early 20s. No other children. There is no infidelity of any kind involved on either side. I realize this post is one-sided by definition. No matter how objective I try to be, only one viewpoint is represented, and my wife is going to sound just awful, and I'm going to sound just amazing. It's definitely not that way, I can assure you, but these are my own concerns, and so they are going to sound rather one-sided. My wife will not work, and this bothers me a lot. She was still living at home when we married and hadn't started her career yet. Then the baby came and she filled the mom role while I worked, entirely from home, as is the nature of my career. She did not want to be a mom. In our early years, she even suggested we divorce and I take sole custody. We had some big early problems, but we got better. I say that just for context. She was and is a good mom, but never wanted the full-time role. I assumed she wanted a career. I chose my career, and I was open to whichever road she chose for our daughter, mom or career. She chose mom and managed to squeeze in a ba during 3 of those years while our daughter was around 5 to 8. When our daughter graduated HS, I assumed she'd transition slowly into a career. What a tough thing to do, needs time for sure. We've touched on the subject over the last 5 years, but it always proves toxic. No matter how diplomatic or understanding I try to be, it becomes explosive for her, and I'm accused of misogyny, selfishness, and other things until I back down or we just agree to leave it alone. We've left it alone for as long as a year once by mutual agreement, but it became toxic immediately afterwards and no progress ever happens. I feel like my wife has settled into early retirement. She feels like she's paid her dues by foregoing a career to be our daughter's primary caregiver. She reads, tends her garden, watches movies, and plays piano and other leisure activities while I work full-time and will do so out of necessity for at least 20 more years. She keeps extremely nocturnal hours. We share housework, she shops, I do dishes. We each cook our own meals, do our own laundry, and clean our own spaces. Common spaces are left rather sloppy full-time, typically until we do sort of a joint speed cleanup together. We are both good with this arrangement, and for my part I'd rather have a working partner than a mom-wife anyway during our empty nest years. The way I see it, we should both be working until we can both feasibly retire, at which point one or both of us might continue working by choice. I feel like this is what two equal partners do. Salaries don't matter, but contributing equal effort does. I feel like I've become a slave in my house. I used to wonder what would she do if I died, and why doesn't she just start doing that? Recently those thoughts have morphed into wondering if I should seek a divorce before our marriage goes so long that a divorce would require lifelong alimony, basically mandating our current situation by force of law forever. I know very little about divorce, so maybe that's hyperbolic. And then there's the effect on our daughter if I even brought up divorce. It would surely reach her that dad was bailing, even if it was more of a bluff than anything else. And if I actually served papers, yikes, surely that would tear our daughter to pieces. Perhaps I am being super messed up in my thinking. I revere moms and respect what they do, especially full-time moms. I had an amazing mom who raised me on her own, and she would never have faded quietly into dependence on a man. Perhaps I'm expecting my wife to be too much like my mom. Sorry for the length. To sum up, A. Move to divorce, or B. Get my head straight. She is scared of it and very self-defeating about it, and she does sometimes communicate that when we talk. Talks invariably tend towards me being unreasonable at best for expecting her to work. She raised our child, and that I must not value that sacrifice, or offering to deliver pizza or flip burgers if that's really what I want. If I try to enumerate her talents and education and suggest things that sound worthy of her skills and time, everything is always shut down as no jobs there. They don't hire women who've had babies. They'll only hire millennials for that. There's an exhausting list. Our relationship apart from this subject is actually pretty okay. We do have conflicts, but they are the exception and not the rule. She's uncommonly beautiful and smart. Yes, I tell her this, in an out-of-my-league sort of way. If we did split over the working issue, there's no way I'd ever date or marry a more beautiful woman. Deep down, she may feel that ought to be enough for me, don't know. But for me it's a self-respect issue. I do feel like where we once were working together as a team, I am now working for her and I'm not okay with it. I would ultimately split over it unless I come to the realization that I'm overlooking something critical in my thinking. I say that salaries don't matter in the sense that how much she makes is not particularly relevant to me. One of the self-defeating things she will sometimes say is that she'll only earn a third of what I do at best, at least at first, so why bother? I say to her salary doesn't matter, only that she works, and that even if it's just a third that would still double our disposable income, changing our lives by quite a lot. Basically, I'm used to saying salary doesn't matter to clarify that I don't expect her to meet or exceed my income. I'm not sure there are other options actually, at least not that I have any control over. There is the third option C, that she starts a career. There are other steps along the way towards option A, counseling at least, which may provide an off-ramp. But that off-ramp would have to lead to either option B, I realize I'm wrong, or option C, she starts her career, but I have no control over this one. Perhaps there are other end games I'm not considering. She was well provided for by an upper-middle-class family, but that's about all the positive you could say. Alcoholic parents, openly unfaithful father. No warmth in that house that I could detect all those years ago. She was dealt a real crap set of cards on that front. I'm actually not entirely sure I'd be happy with a purely domestic partner, not in our empty nesting years anyway. I've never seen that modeled for me, but I agree that it would be a better situation. I can sometimes suffer from peace at all costs, but I also can stand firm when it matters, and I'm trying to figure out if this matters as much as I think it does. I sincerely hope you are wrong in your prediction. We live in Washington State. I have wanted to consult with someone about the financial implications of divorce, but it's felt like a line I'm hesitant to cross. Got to pay a lawyer. That means I have to hide a little money. That means I have to be a little sneaky, but I am going to have to get over that. This forum is my first attempt to reach outside my head about this. Regarding assets in a divorce outcome, I'm perfectly fine with 50-50, including current retirement assets. Seems only fair. It's my future earnings and future retirement savings I'd want to protect. I'm also fine with alimony, just not lifelong. The idea that I may already be locked into lifelong support is terrifying, but I have indeed wondered if that isn't already the case. One possible scenario I've imagined, should it come to divorce, is to relocate for that purpose. As the only one working, we'd kind of have to go wherever my job is. I can work at a more traditional company in my field and get myself hired in another state if mine is hyper-punitive with alimony. That's an even more clandestine move that I'm uncomfortable with, but I'm admittedly not above if the alternative were really as bad as I could imagine. No, I've never asked what she'd do if I stopped working, but I can say I've daydreamed about doing exactly that to see if it kick-started anything. When we talk, I have instead framed a similar question: what if I'm gone? What would you do then, and can you imagine doing that now? Answers to these kinds of questions lie beyond the boundary where these discussions go emotional. Her whole family works, but she is estranged from all of them. Bad childhood. As friends that do, but I'm reluctant to reveal our problems to our friends. More comfortable with counselor here. I'm fully on board with taking additional courses, even or getting another degree, as long as it's something likely to result in employment, and have expressed this often. The way I see it, investing a bunch of money in additional education is nothing compared to the earning power of two working people with no dependents. Starting a business works too, but one has to have a head for business. I certainly don't. I don't know what that's like. It would need to go farther than a side hustle for a few bucks. I suspect she's not the entrepreneurial type, but I wouldn't want to put her in a box and would absolutely support her trying it out. About volunteering her time instead, I'm very supportive of that as something done over and above one's job, between jobs, or in retirement. She's never suggested doing that in lieu of employment, and I'm not particularly keen on it. Perhaps my view is too rigid. That's interesting that it might lead to increased experience and confidence, which I'd classify as something done between jobs. If she volunteered without working for an extended period of years or indefinitely, I'm pretty sure I'd feel like we were in the same place. I'm working so she can do as she likes. I guess that means for me it's not about her specific choice of optional endeavors. It's about her being independent. I don't think I've used exactly those words before about being a team. I write so much better than I speak. I will try next time we discuss. She has also expressed something like this during one of our many disagreements about the subject over the last 5 years. We had no explicit agreement about what we'd do after our daughter was grown. Crazy as it sounds, that subject never really came up until our daughter leaving for college was approaching on the horizon. I can't escape that I don't yet agree with this perspective though. I feel like I can revere motherhood as heroic while simultaneously having the expectation that she plows the field with me until we can both retire together. If we were just 5 years away, or well off enough that my own work could also be considered optional, that'd be different to me. But we're 25 years away, halfway through our productive years at best. I am sincerely looking for flaws in this thinking though. When we married, I had no expectation that she'd expect motherhood to be her final contribution to our future. We were not specific about it, but perhaps to both of us our view seemed self-evident. I'm pretty intuitive and picked up on nothing to indicate this from her at the time, although I was a lot younger and naiver. However, I also apparently missed it completely while our daughter was growing up. Certainly, squeezing in a ba while being mom was an indication. She did have plans beyond stay-at-home mom at one time. My wife is not steady, calm, she can be rather volatile. My wife sounds much more reliable than your mom in terms of keeping promises. She did not want a big family, and the mom role was something she didn't want but chose to rise to. She was not fully domestic while our daughter was at home. For example, cooking, cleaning, laundry where I was concerned was almost always divided, but she did these things consistently for our daughter. I was okay with this because I knew she was struggling with the role to begin with. Nocturnal habits were always a thing to some degree, and working from home I'd generally handle early morning things like school drop-off. I was okay with this too, still am looking back, because even though I worked from home I would sometimes be very unavailable during the workday, so having some guaranteed time with my daughter in the morning was gold. About gold digging, I don't know. She certainly could have picked a wealthier guy to dig from if that was her intent. The way I see it, I think it's more likely that she's some combination of paralyzed and no longer into our marriage. She either can't find the courage to step out into the world or has come to think so little of our life together that it's not worth contributing to, but at least it's comfortable enough. That last bit is a possibility I'm coming to grips with in real time. I believe there are issues which warrant going all the way over. My current thinking is that this may be one of those issues. It goes to the heart of self-respect. I don't think it's something that can be absorbed without leaking out later. At stake is whether we are still equal partners, or if I am to simply follow her lead into becoming her benefactor. Most any other disagreement we could have does not threaten to redefine the nature of our relationship so fundamentally, and indeed should not be dwelled on if change isn't possible. I'm not so sure this issue qualifies, but I remain open to the possibility that my reasoning is flawed. All this talk of divorce, it's the end state of just one possible road, a road I'm building confidence that I shouldn't leave off the table. It's definitely not the next step. Order of operations, in my mind. 1. Consult lawyer to understand my footing. Basically, does the state agree with me or my wife? If I decide I'm willing to go to the mat over this, I have to understand the stakes first. I may still go to the mat even if the statutes think I should work for her indefinitely so she doesn't have to, but that would be a more complicated decision. 2. Initiate counseling. I have no idea how long this step will take or what recommendations we'll be following, but I suspect by the end of this step we'll know the broad strokes of what our roles are for the rest of our lives. 3. Either divorce, surrender, or enjoy life with my increasingly independent wife while we work towards renewed mutual goals equipped with improved relationship skills. I didn't stick through those dark years just for her, at least not at first. For me, a big part of it was devotion to an absolute dogma that I don't even hold anymore. One life, one wife. She believed in no such dogma, and she could have left too. She was young and had a well-off family to return to. I believe her reasons for staying were more centered on me than mine were on her. Also, those dark years forged us in ways we could never have done without being essentially locked in a cage together. I like who I became coming out a lot better than going in, and she feels the same about herself. I like to think that this is a big part of why we don't hold those years over each other. If either of us had left, we'd have just taken our respective issues right into our next relationship. My dysfunction was no better than hers, even though it doesn't read that way in hindsight. Would I have had an easier time with someone else? Maybe, but I have qualities now that I like that I don't think I could have forged in an easier life. My comment: sounds to me like you folks had a near meltdowns in early stage of marriage where princess from a rich family background finally agreed to take on the mom role due to societal guilt. The 25 to 30-year-old version of her knew that society would have a very dim view of her not even engaging in the very basic family building process that everyone goes through. She did not take on the stay-at-home mom role out of love for you or for your daughter. She did it because it was the most face-saving thing she could pull off with the least amount of effort. As we grow older, we all pay less attention to these societal pressures and gravitate more to our true state of being. Her state of being appears to be a sense of privilege, nurtured by rich original family, that mooches off the most convenient source that would be you. Essentially, she resents you and society in general for making her work beyond her preferred princess level of work output. Now that she has her badge of respectability from her stay-at-home efforts, society can no longer shame her into working. And she doesn't need to work because she has you to provide for the finances. Making this an issue of making money, however, is a losing proposition. If you make it a you have to make $30,000 a year, it simply becomes a matter of her thinking I have to work so my lazy husband can retire earlier, even though I've already done my part in giving up my career and raising the best daughter anyone could ever hope for. Rather, your only hope here is to frame the argument around activity, and that you don't want to spend the rest of your life with someone who chooses to be a lump on the log for the rest of her life. Tell her that you're losing respect for her and falling out of love because she's not actively participating in making the world around her better. There are multiple ways that she could make things better. She could help out by taking on a bigger share of the housework and maybe supplementing that with some serious volunteer duties, not the women's auxiliary for lunch, a real volunteer rolling her sleeves up and helping somebody directly. Or she can go to school, or she can get a paying job. If she chooses none of the above by September, the time for real school to begin again, you promise to start divorce proceedings, but only threaten if you think you will follow through with it. Without an ultimatum, nothing will ever change. If you are committed to pushing this type of change, you will have to remove the comfortable options currently available to her.